So firstly, a big thank you for inviting me. It's actually really my first kind of formal engagement, let's call it, with the community, other than a number of one-on-one conversations and telephone conversations and email conversations I've had. So I don't know if this is should be scary or not. So I'm excited to actually get everyone's kind of questions. Let's hope there are some. Uh, You've allocated 15 minutes for me. I'm actually going to go through 7 slides in about 5 minutes. And then I'm going to leave the rest of the time for questions and answers. And if there's no more questions and answers, then that's fine, or we can reference specific slides. So the first thing is, why a CID in Lower Gardens? So I get asked this question all the time, and I've tried to find a way of articulating that well to people, and a lot of it comes from my own personal context. So the first thing is there a problem in Lower Gardens? And I think I will take you through some of the UMS, the Urban Management Survey responses, but I think widely the community has agreed very strongly that there is a genuine problem along the areas of crime, social services, public parks, and cleaning and maintenance. Okay. I think the next point that I always say, and there's a point of alignment with everyone, is that almost everyone agrees that in a high functioning society, the government and the municipality should pay for all of this. Okay. And we already pay rates and taxes. But the reality is, the reason why we have a problem is because there's a gap in services. Okay. And I look at that through the context of the South African context. And in real terms, I've quoted a figure here. I don't know if you can see my screen. Maybe I should move that down a bit. That's all right. But currently, of our rates and taxes in the current budget, 74% of that is spent on other communities other than ourselves. Okay. That's an estimate by the mayor. And the majority of those communities, in many cases, don't even pay rates and taxes. Okay. That's the reality of the South African context. And it will actually only change if we change the macro social economic challenges. So unless the economy improves, unless governance across the whole country improves, that kind of mix of ratepayers subsidizing the rest is unlikely to change in the short term. Next thing that we need to think about is that the city of Cape Town doesn't control all the services anyway. So a good example would be SAPS. And most obviously from the UMS, safety and security is the biggest concern of our community. So what do we do? Why do we have a CID? So it's quite simple in my articulation. There's 4 things that we could possibly do. Firstly, we can do nothing. And some communities do nothing. But I think we all kind of align that if we do nothing, there's likely to be continued decline. I think that's not just a Lower Gardens problem. I think that's a kind of a South African-wide problem. The second thing that we see a lot of is people they move. Obviously, the extreme cases, they immigrate or semigrate, but many people move to gated communities or more secure environments. In some cases, that could be apartment blocks relative to residential homes. The third thing is what all of you guys are doing right now, which is fantastic. And thank God we have this in South Africa, but people are actually standing up and they are supporting what I broadly call civil society organizations like Gardens Watch. Now, I'm just used some figures here to kind of highlight the challenges with civil society organizations. The biggest challenge is generally they're badly supported financially. Okay, that's the biggest challenge if you think about the whole community. So just if you look at our community, there's 1,421 property owners, and less than 30 fund the Gardens Watch cleaning program. That in itself is a statement about the challenge that any civil society organization would face. The other big challenge is that they're staffed by volunteers. Although those volunteers do fantastic work, they're generally not professionals or experts in the field of the challenges like safety and security and social services, as an example. And that becomes even harder as a community might decline because of socioeconomic reasons and macro reasons. So the last option is really to form a CID. So why is a CID beneficial? Like I explain it quite simply. Everyone contributes and everyone benefits. Okay, that's the reality. That's a big difference between the civil society movements. It's not everyone contributes and therefore not everyone benefits. But in a CID, everyone contributes and therefore everyone benefits. But I want to emphasize it's not a silver bullet. You don't just form a CID and then everything is perfect. That's unrealistic.
the property owners are the shareholders of that SID, and they have to hold the professional people that they hire accountable, okay? And they have to make sure that the standards are high and maintained. So I want to emphasize that a SID is not a silver bullet, but it is an opportunity where everyone contributes and everyone can benefit. So just understanding the steering committee, this is us and myself at the top. We're all property owners within the community. Some of us are residents, some of our commercial property owners. All have kind of different objectives. We've got residential property owners there. We've got commercial property owners there. The last person on the list is not a property owner. They are helping from an administration perspective. If you want to find out more about us and the reason why we signed up to try and form a SID, there's a link at the bottom of that. And I'll share this deck with Nikki afterwards, and she can share it widely. So just quickly, just a bit about the precinct, and I'm talking about some numbers because they're relevant when you think about a SID. The first is, what is the valuation of our properties? It's over 5 billion rand. That's the overall valuation within the precinct that we've defined. Okay, that's a huge amount of money and value that we want to retain and hopefully grow. If you want to grow your property value, we have 1,421 properties within this precinct that I have here on the right. We would need 853 of those to vote yes if we were to keep a SID within this framework. That's 66% of those, so 2/3 of them are residential properties and 33% are commercial non-residential properties. Important to understand the average property value. So the average property value for resident property is 2.6 million, and for a commercial property is 5.5. Why is that important? Is the number one question you'll ask if you support the SID is, how much is this going to cost me? Okay, and the best way to understand that is it will be a amount on R1 million of your valuation. So I'll just use an extreme example. I'm not saying that, not extreme example, an example. I'm not saying that this is what the SID would cost, but let's say it cost 100 rand. The city would charge you 100 rand per R1 million. So in other words, if your property value was at 2.5 million rand, you would pay 250 rand as a SID levy. If that makes any sense. I hope I've explained that all right. I believe, because you're all upstanding citizens and contribute to the community, you all probably would have definitely answered the urban management survey. This little infographic, together with the full survey, which is like 80 pages long, will be shared with every property owner in the first week of November. But to give you an understanding of like what the numbers were like, and I've spoken a bit about the profile, I won't talk about that, but basically 86% of the people who responded support the SID. Okay, of those that responded positively, 79% of them are willing to spend up to 10%, between 10% and 20% of their existing rates on a SID levy, which is really great. That so many people are supportive. Some of the big things to recognize is the biggest worries are simple: safety and security. And safety and security is theft out of motor vehicles and muggings. Okay, people are nervous at night. Are people drawing on the screen? Okay, cool. I'm happy for you to do that. I don't know who's doing that, but it's cool. Or is that just on my side? No, it's on everyone's side.
I think it's an accident.
Okay, no straight. But biggest issues, safety and security and social services. Those are the real issues. Okay. On the park side, you know, very few people use the parks. And the most obvious reason why is because they're probably occupied or not very nice to use. So that's a big area of focus that needs to be improved. But in simple terms, the vast majority, if a SID is successful, the vast majority of the budget, certainly in year one, would go to fixing the safety and security and social services challenges. And once those are fixed, and I believe that they are very fixable, then they would be maintained, and then more money could be spent into the wider organization, which includes some of the really nice stuff like, you know, greening all the sidewalks, fixing, you know, planting indigenous plants across all the parks, and large capital projects as well could be considered. as we fix the two major problems, being social services and safety and security. Give you an understanding of the next steps. So there's 9 core steps. We've completed the kind of first 4, which is, we've got approved by the city. We've set up a steering committee. We're in good standing. 95% of the people within our Lower Garden community are up to date on their rates and taxes. And we've sent out the urban management survey, and we've passed the threshold pretty easily in a very short period of time, which is exciting. The next step is we are now, as the steering committee, I was going to use the word frantically, it's not the right word, building out the business plan based on the urban management survey feedback. We will likely complete that by the end of this year. That will then be approved by the City of Cape Town, and we will then call a first public meeting. We're aiming to have the first public meeting in the beginning of February, and we would take feedback from that public meeting, and then we would have the second public meeting the beginning of March. From that moment, after the second public meeting, people would be able to vote. And we would, we believe that we could start as soon as the end of March, beginning of April for the vote, and we will give ourselves until October to get the 853 votes. As soon as we've got the 853 votes, we can submit that to the City of Cape Town, and then they will go through their processes to approve it, and hopefully they would be able to approve it by the start of 2025. If we got all the votes in April, as an example, 853 votes, then we would be able to submit it before the June cutoff, and then we could potentially even start the CID in the second half of 2024. But that means, we would have to get 853 votes done in 2 months, which I think is unrealistic, but potentially possible. And that leads into, how can you help? Okay. So, the steering committee is working very hard. I think you're going to be very impressed with the business plan. We've done a tour of multiple CIDs already. There'll be lots of detail in that, as well as short forms, because I know lots of people don't want to read long business plans. But we've already approached multiple suppliers who are already across multiple CIDs to give kind of first draft proposals for our community based on the urban management survey, and we will use that to define and craft the right business plan for our community, which you guys will approve through the two public meetings and the vote. But where we need help, looking at the data, and we're quite a data-driven steering committee, the biggest challenge we have is actually getting to owners within the 20 apartment blocks in Lower Gardens. That is a real challenge for us. So we're looking for volunteers who are ideally property owners, but they can also be tenants who are living in any of the 20 apartment blocks. And what we're asking for them, and it will only be next year after the first public meeting, is that they help validate the property contact information through, their body corporates and stuff like that, and their own knowledge. And they also help us arrange an in-person and or virtual meeting with those apartment blocks. Because I believe if we really want to win the 853 votes, we will have to have 20 individual meetings with each apartment block. And then lastly, we are looking for volunteers to help us gather votes. We will do our best to automate that as much as possible. So do everything online, send the forms ready pre-populated to the property owners, so that they can just simply sign if they are supportive. But we will need people. I don't think the 853 will just happen immediately. So those of you who are interested to, take your street on and knock door to door with our support to gather the votes, that would be really appreciated. So if you're interested, that email address, lowergardens.co.za, is easily answerable. I think I went longer than I would have liked, so I'm just opening the floor to Q&A. Any questions? And we champion not negative feedback, but non-supportive feedback as well. So we're not looking for only positive feedback. We're also looking for what could be done better, and even reasons why the CID it shouldn't be supported in your eyes. We're happy to take all that feedback on.
I've muted everybody, so just unmute yourself if you would like to chat. Diana, I see you've got a hand up. Go ahead.
I was just interested to know how you selected the sample for your questionnaire on which you based the statistics for your urban management screen that you showed.
So you're referring to this?
Yeah. How did you, you spoke about 287 respondents. How were they selected? Was it a good sampling? Did it cover the area, the income groups, etc.?
Sure. So they weren't selected. Every single property owner within Lower Gardens received 6 communications. That's a lie. When I say every single, that is incorrect. We have 100 and I think it's 121 or 111 that we actually don't have telephone numbers or emails for. But every single other one over and above that would have received an email communication, and in some cases where there was not adequate email communication, they would have received the phone communication.
Was it only addressed to property owners, not residents?
It was addressed to property owners and or their tenants. So we received through the POPI Act, the City of Cape Town provides us with a database of all the property owners and where they send their rates. Okay, many of those are managing agents, so we engaged many managing agents who then forwarded onto their property owners. But yeah, we went through 6 rounds of communication, and the bylaw requires us to have 20% of the property owners respond. We had 40% of the property owners. So just so you understand that, you can see the figure: 287 respondents, but 570 property owners responded. So what that means is, you know, one respondent can have multiple properties, as an example. You know, so out of the 1,421 properties, 570 replied, if that makes sense.
So, interestingly enough, I've never seen anything at all. So I just wondered how it had all happened. Thank you.
Brilliant. And are you a property owner or a tenant, if I may ask?
I'm a tenant.
Okay. Cool. We take feedback from tenants as well. So it was shared on the community WhatsApp groups, I think multiple times. But you can still complete the urban management survey. We're taking feedback all the way up to the first public meeting. Was that answer adequate? Any other questions?
Yeah, I have one. Tony Holmes. I'm based on your presentation, which I found very useful and interesting. I'm confused about the relative importance or roles of tenants versus property owners. I'm an owner, but I have a contiguous property with the Hazelmere block of flats, which is immediately behind the engine petrol station on Hatfield Street. Yes. And they have been, and I've been there 10 years, and I've had a number of issues that I've had to deal with them. They are most uncooperative, to be diplomatic about it. And so I'm wondering if tenants can carry weight and be considered equivalent to property owners if property owners don't somehow trump them, or if you actually need the property owner of a block of, I think there are 30 flats in Hazelmere, which could really throw a spanner in your works.
Yeah, so only property owners can vote. They can designate their tenant to vote on their behalf, but it's legally on their behalf. So the best way to think about it is, if a CID is successful, the property owners are effectively the shareholders of the CID, and they vote annually on the existence of the CID. They can close it if they want to, but they can also change the direction of the budget and the operations. So, you know, at the annual general meeting, if the property owners were unhappy with, say, the CID manager, then they could put that on the agenda and remove the CID manager, literally fire that person, much the same as shareholders of a company would do that. So that's how it works. Yeah.
So that would require an exceptional level of engagement on the part of property owners. And my experience in Cape Town is that they're interested in seeing their monthly deposits roll in. But when it comes to expenditures or even devoting time and energy to an issue, they're very reticent. So to just follow on the same line, are you going to approach the owners of these properties and try to sell them on this?
Yes.
Okay, so you're going to do that because I suspect that regardless of whether they would be engaged themselves or whether they would just permit you to approach and authorize tenants individually, that it's going to be the tenants who pay the costs either directly or through some sort of monthly rental payment that would be inserted after the CID's up and running. And that sort of thinking that through from the beginning, I suspect it's going to be important in achieving the result you want.
Absolutely. So to give you an understanding, there are, and again, the numbers are not exact, but approximately right. There's about 65 property owners who control upwards of 40% of the vote. I've personally been in contact with almost all of them. So you referred to apartment blocks, Hazelmere and others. That's whether it's subdivided or not, i.e. section title or not, you can have one apartment block that can be worth 1 vote, and you can have an apartment block that's worth 30 votes. There's multiple versions across our community and our precinct, but we're aware of all of those, and I would say 80% of the way to being in contact with all the larger property owners who have a lot of sway. As an example, the property owner who pays the largest rates and taxes in our area is a listed property owner, but they pay, their valuation is 1.6 billion, I think, of their properties, but they actually only stand to be corrected, less than 10 votes. But they pay the most rates and taxes in our community. So we're very aware of that, and we've done quite a detailed analysis of it. Is that helpful in answering the question?
Yeah, sure. I mean, and I'm trying to help you. Perhaps it's a bit gratuitously, but and you've already these things have occurred to you. But no, it's fine. I wish you luck. I wish I could more than able to.
Well, I mean, each of you can help. If you're supportive, each of you can help by just talking to your fellow neighbors, property owners. If you need supporting information, you need details around the success of CIDs, the challenges, we have all of that. So very helpful to provide you with the support, because this is not going to be easy, in my opinion. And I certainly, and the steering committee can't do it on their own. We need the support of the community to achieve it.
Ryan, we're racing ahead with time. I can see John's got his hand up. So, John, can we have your question? But yeah, Ryan, if you can keep it as brief as possible. Question. You've got 1 minute. Sure. Go.
No problem. Thanks, Nikki, for keeping me honest. John? Is it John?
Yeah, is that me?
Yes, I think it is.
Jonathan Ross? Ah, yeah, lovely. So here's
hi, Jonathan.
my question. Nice to see you, Ryan, and nice to see everyone else. I'm curious, there's something a little bit distressing to me about being a rates payer and income tax payer and giving up on the possibility of having the municipal government deliver services that are in their essence municipal services. I'm wondering whether one wing of the activities of the CID could be to comprehensively engage one by one with all of the operational departments of the city to give them a little bit of feedback. I have had a certain amount of experience dealing with them on substantive issues around land use, around licensing of food premises and other businesses, around a host of other things, and I find them uniformly resistant, non-transparent, non-responsive. It's very difficult to get telephone numbers and emails from them. I would love to think that in addition to paying for services we're already paying for, maybe we could start to engage with some of the providers or supposed providers of those services to get more information from them and to give them a little bit more feedback. They seem to be able to ignore everything from ratepayers associations to lawsuits to the actual bylaws themselves and do things precisely the way they want to. Again, speaking from my personal experience, Blue Cafe as an example, I would just love to not give up on the idea that the money that we are paying for municipal services is thrown out the window. And that's why we have to hire a second guy with a can of paint and a brush to paint our porch, because the first guy has decided that those resources needed to be used somewhere else or whatever it is. I guess I'm really discouraged to think that this is the only possible way forward. I'd like to see accountability become something that actually happens around here.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a number of points in that. I think my short response is a high-functioning CID is an aggregated voice for the community that has direct contact with all the relevant both strategic and operational players that speak to that community. The city, under the bylaw, is actually required to give us an understanding of the minimum services that deliver to that community, and the CID has the opportunity to hold them accountable for those minimum services. So they must do that. That's a key function of the CID, in my opinion, and the community must hold the CID and the city accountable for that, and it must be transparent. So in other words, if the city is providing 1 to 8 and the city is providing 9 to 10, then both need to be held accountable by the community. But the key point is the city is there to provide the gap in services that the community feels is not being done for whatever reason. Some of that might be because the city's not doing a good enough job. Then the city doesn't need to do that. It just needs to hold them accountable. And others, like, they just don't have the resources. Like, as an example, in policing might be an example, or social services might be an example, or they only clean the streets once a month and we want to clean daily. That could be the difference. Hope that answers my question, but happy to continue that discussion, Jonathan. I understand your concerns around the 2 layers of management, for want of a better word, and we want to optimize rather than add more bureaucracy, definitely. Okay, Nikki, that's
exactly right. And the other thing is,
sorry, we've got to move on. We're already quite behind the clock, so we can.
Yeah, happy. Anyone wants to ask questions, you can contact me personally. info@lowergardencid.co.za. Unfortunately, I always ask you to send me emails because I have to record every communication with any property owners or tenants within the community. Sorry about that, but happy to have calls and distill them down to emails. Cheers.